Part 49. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 500. It seems that it must be the virgin boy who died. He was not transferred. Hound nodded to the others. However, Ayabra did not signal her men to put down their weapons. Instead, she took a step forward and continued to ask Kaylan, "You suddenly disappeared just now. What happened? We need an explanation." "I can't explain clearly," Kaylan shrugged. "The moment Valkyrie's sniper cannon hit the tumor-like protrusion, I was teleported to a dark space without light and sound, as if I was being transported. It was like being locked up in a solitary room. Just when I thought it would be difficult to escape, it released me inexplicably. As for how long I stayed in it, I couldn't tell, because the speed of time in that space seemed not to be the same. Unusual. 19.5 seconds, this is the time that passes from when you disappear to when you reappear," I added, "based on the time in our dimension." 19.5 seconds. Kaylan chewed on this number repeatedly. Although he could not determine how much time had passed in that dark space, it would definitely not be less than 5 minutes. In the eyes of the hounds and others, he had just disappeared. Less than 20 seconds. The time in that space is not synchronized with the real world, so it makes perfect sense that the duration of the time stop ability can be extended to 4 or 5 seconds, the 4 or 5 seconds that Kaylan feels, probably not even a second in reality. By the way, where is the monster summoned by Park Sang-woo? Kaylan suddenly thought of this and turned around immediately. "It died. Just now, you appeared immediately after it died." Aya's voice came from behind. Just 5 meters in front of Kaylan, the capsule-shaped rescue capsule fell to the ground. Its deflated tentacles were hanging messily on the ground, completely losing the full feeling before. Under its body, there was a large pool of transparent liquid spread, forming an irregular puddle several meters in diameter. It looked like a giant slug that had been sprinkled with salt and dehydrated to death. "How did it die? Did you kill it?" Kaylan asked. "It has nothing to do with us. It died on its own." Aya hesitated when she said this. Obviously, she was not sure whether her judgment was correct. "We don't know what happened," Hound added. "Just 5 seconds before you came back from that confined space, oh, maybe only 3 seconds, this monster seemed to have a sudden illness. Its whole body twitched violently, and we thought it was going to use some big move, so we all fired at it, and then it died suddenly. As for whether it was killed by us, or for some other reason, I can't say sure. It was probably not killed by us." Aya shook her head slightly. "After Kaylan disappeared, we began to attack the monster. The firepower was never interrupted, but the previous attacks had no impact on it." "Perhaps the quantitative change caused the qualitative change," Hound muttered. "This guy's defense mechanism may be the same as the energy shield. We fired all the ammunition on the shield at the beginning, and then waited until the energy of the shield was consumed. It's its turn. I still prefer natural death. The genetic sequences of many Alpha civilization biological weapons are extremely unstable and there is a risk of collapse at any time. In my impression, there are many biological weapons with a lifespan of only 10 minutes. Maybe it is one of them," I retorted. "It's meaningless to argue about this now. I suggest checking the monster's body. Maybe we can make breakthrough discoveries," Yvonne said, and he couldn't wait to take out a chainsaw. "Second the proposal." Kaylan raised his hand without hesitation. "According to the normal processing procedures, any corpse of such an unknown creature should be sealed up as soon as possible and sent to the Institute's affiliated institution closest to the scene. However, the current situation is special, and everyone can only place their hope on Yvonne, an amateur biology enthusiast. I've heard jokes about veterinarians treating people, but it turns out that it's the doctors who treat people who dissect monsters. It's so damn ironic." Hound watched Yvonne swinging a chainsaw at the monster's corpse and couldn't help but complained. "The specimens that medical students first dissect are not humans, but animals such as mice," Yvonne replied calmly, and medicine has many things in common with biology, plus. Ivan stopped talking halfway through. But everyone in the hunting god hunting group also knew what he didn't say. Out of personal interest, Ivan often buys the corpses of some indigenous creatures from Alpha Planet on the black market and brings them back to the clinic for research. However, the origin of these corpses obviously cannot be legal. Now people from the Security Bureau are standing nearby. Fan naturally would not say such words in front of them. Although there is a high probability that they will not pursue this issue in this current situation, after all, one more thing is worse than one less thing. The monster's tentacles were quickly cut off by a chainsaw, and Ivan dug out a broken human skeleton in the rescue cabin. Park Sang-woo's flesh and blood had disappeared, but the skeleton was preserved. These are all crushed into pieces. The hound looked at the bone fragments that Ivan picked out from a pile of jelly-like slimy tissue with large tweezers, and sighed, "This is the thing that came out of its body. Was it crushed to pieces when he was rescued, or was it crushed alive by being squeezed into the narrow space of the rescue cabin? No matter which one it is, it sounds painful." Layton continued. Kaylan did not participate in their chat. Instead, he squatted on the ground, picked out the parts of the skull from hundreds of bone fragments, and pieced them together bit by bit with quick-drying glue. It took him almost an hour to restore the head. Although there were still many missing parts, the general outline was at least revealed. However, looking at the skull in his hand, Kaylan felt more and more something was wrong. "Leader Brita, please extract the DNA from these bone fragments and compare it with the data in the archives," Kaylan demanded. Aya Brea did as she was told, but the result was somewhat beyond everyone's expectations. The samples extracted from the bone marrow detected the DNA of two people, one of which was Park Sang-woo's, and the other was. No matching data was found in the archives. But what is certain is that this unknown DNA is human DNA, not the gene of some kind of monster. Is it because of the monster that Park Sang-woo's genes have mutated? Aya guessed. But the deceased was not Park Sang-woo. In other words, when he died, he was no longer Park Sang-woo. Kaylan held up the pieced head. "This is another person." "What?" Aya took the head in disbelief and scanned its facial bone features, but as Kaylan said, there was no information about this face in the archives either. "Is it possible to roughly restore the deceased's appearance through facial bones?" Kaylan glanced at her and asked. Yes. Aya bit her lower lip and started typing on the virtual keyboard with both hands. Not long after, a face completely different from Park Sang-woo's appeared on the screen. The moment he saw this face, Ian's eyebrows suddenly raised, and this detail was immediately captured by Aya. "Do you know this guy?" "I can't say we know each other, but we have met once," Kaylan said. "Who is he?" "A stand-in for the man who founded the heretical section. P.S. Thanks to 9,898 for the reward on January 3rd. Try clicking the number and reward the 1,600 starting coins. P.P.S. The end of the month is coming soon, and monthly tickets will be doubled starting on the 29th. If you have extra monthly tickets, I hope you can vote for them, and recommend votes. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 501. "Have you seen that person?" Aya Brea's expression suddenly changed. Yes, Kaylan did not deny it. "I have seen one of his substitutes." "You mean this face is exactly the same as that person's double?" Aya blurted out, and then asked, "Where have you seen him? And when?" "This is secret, the highest level." Kaylan raised a finger in front of his lips. "Since you don't know, it means that as the field team leader of the Security Bureau, your authority level is not high enough to read this level of confidentiality." Aya was at a loss for words. She wanted to defend herself, but found that she was not reasonable. "I really can't tell you." Kaylan met her unwilling eyes. "Don't think I'm lying to you. If it weren't for these troubles, do you think the commander of this reconnaissance team would fall into the trap, on the head of a civilian like me? Although this group of people have all been classified as military personnel, it is not difficult for anyone with a little social experience to see that this operation is just in name and is equivalent to a special protection method. In fact, they neither have to bear the obligations of being a soldier nor can they enjoy the corresponding rights, so there is no problem for Kaylan to say that he is a civilian. It's a pity that this guy is dead. The Hound stepped forward and picked up a bone fragment more than 10 centimeters long from his waist. Judging from the curvature and thickness of the bone fragment, it should have come from a broken rib. We finally got new clues, but he died and the clues were broken again. The Hound dropped the bones on the ground, and we still know nothing about this ghost place. No, there is still some progress, Kaylan said. Originally I was just guessing, but now that Park Sang-woo's true identity has been exposed, I can basically confirm that we are inside the Agunakotaer. The context of the whole thing is already obvious. Although Park Sang-woo, the substitute of the Prophet, successfully blended into the first batch of exploration teams, they apparently encountered an accident in the ancient battleship. 4 people died and 1 person was missing. Only Park Sang-woo was left and was able to escape successfully with the help of the rescue capsule. Regardless of whether the others died at the hands of Park Sang-woo or were killed by something else, at least the first exploration was declared a failure. With the ability of a Prophet substitute, Park Sang-woo could leave the molten mine area on his own. Whether he returned to the heretical sect or lurked inside the Ark again, it was a feasible option, but he did not do so. He chose to stay and pretended to be near death, allowing Kaylan and others to save him. Then through superb acting skills, they were induced to enter the tunnel. The question lies here, why did Park Sang-woo lead the reconnaissance team into Agunakotaer again after the first exploration failed? In terms of combat power, the reconnaissance team is definitely not as good as the heretical sect troops that have invaded the depths of the mining area. In terms of technology, they are also completely inferior to the professional team sent by the Ark Research Institute, a problem that even the top experts in the industry cannot solve. There is no reason for a group of a ruin hunter and a few security agents can take care of it. There is only one possibility: the key to entering Yagunakter lies within yourself. Although Kaylan is reluctant to admit it, he and the guy who calls himself Prophet do have many similarities. The last stand-in once said that they are the same kind. The Prophet's substitute can use some of the abilities of the main body, but the substitute is still a substitute. Even if the appearance changes to that of the Prophet, it is just an inferior imitation. Perhaps only the true successor can unlock the secrets inside this ancient battleship, but the Prophet, who is said to be cautious by nature at best and timid at worst, does not dare to use his own body to explore. This is a super relic left by the third civilization. The Prophet should have originally planned to use Park Sang-woo as a substitute to replace his real body, but it failed, and then he decided to take action on himself. The only thing Kaylan couldn't figure out was that Park Sang-woo used the rescue capsule to escape from Agunakotaer before he received the reconnaissance mission. How was he sure that he would definitely come to the molten mine area? Could it be that there is a mole in the Undead Crew Association? Then the situation is not good. If there is really a ghost, then his whereabouts will be completely transparent to the heretical section. Even if he escapes the first grade of junior high school, the 15th grade is still waiting behind him. Maybe I should find an opportunity to report this matter to the Undead Crew? But the problem is that I don't have any evidence in my hand, and I can't determine who the mole is. How many of them are? If the person who happened to be in contact with me is the mole, wouldn't it be tantamount to throwing myself into a trap? Kaylan is not sure what Pope Chirandu said to the Undead Crew, but he believes that most people in the Undead Crew still don't know that they are a successor like the Prophet. Otherwise, it is impossible to easily let yourself go to a place like the molten mine area. Once this news leaks out, the heretical sect will definitely try their best to rob it or simply kill themselves. The risk of doing so is too great. If Kaylan were a member of the Immortal Crew Association, he would not let his successor leave the Ark at will. Kaylan discovered that there was a very awkward relationship between himself and these two behemoths. His secret has been hidden from the members of the Immortal Crew Association, but there is a mole within the Immortal Crew Association. The mole is connected to the heretic sect, and the heretic sect knows his secret. He was caught between these two forces, like walking on a single plank bridge with abyss on both sides. He originally thought that infiltrating the Undead Crew Association might be able to protect his personal safety, but since there is a mole within the Crew Association, this mole will definitely not let him get what he wants. It may be a better choice to surrender to the enemy and join a heretical sect. But Kaylan is not used to the behavior of heretical sects. What's more, even if he joins a heretical sect, there is no guarantee that he will not be used as a tool by the Prophet. Like now. Kaylan suddenly felt helpless. But there is a saying, these things need to be considered only after getting out of here. If you can't get out of trouble, then no matter how much you think about it, it will be in vain. P.S. Thanks to book friend 202012261444230096 and Hidden Mistwind for the 100 starting coins. P.P.S. There should be no updates in the past few days. There will be recommendations in November. I am saving the manuscript in this short period of time. There should be a wave of updates during the recommendation period. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 502. Then what are we going to do now? Hound said with some depression. Even if you are right, Kaylan, we are inside that Agunakota now, but what's the use of knowing this? It won't help the current situation at all. You said the stick, why did he die suddenly after just a disagreement? The Hound stepped on the bone fragments on the ground hard, and the bones that were originally broken into small pieces suddenly turned into fine powder. If this guy is still alive, even if he is still alive, you can't pry anything out of his mouth. Kaylan interrupted him and said, this is just a stand-in, and the person who controls the stand-in is not here. For that Prophet it is like a remote-controlled chess piece. When the chess piece falls into the enemy's hand, he can just treat it as being eaten. How can he care about whether the enemy tortures the chess piece? Damn, I'm really pissed off, the Hound said, chopping off the pile of bone meal twice more. However, it's not like we gained nothing. Kaylan walked to the rescue cabin and stuck his head in. At this moment, the rescue cabin was filled with black blood and greasy mucus, and there was a disgusting smell. The fishy smell kept wafting out from inside. The Hound only took a few steps closer and then immediately stepped away with a brow. What's the gain? He asked, pinching his nose. Just after Valentina hit the tumor-like protrusion of the monster larvae with her sniper rifle, was the larvae dead? Kaylan asked again. Well, it exploded on the spot. Those stinking liquids splashed all over us. At that time, you suddenly disappeared. We thought you were vaporized by some special attack. You said you were imprisoned in an abnormal space with no light and sound, and even the flow of time is different from the normal world. Could it have something to do with this shot? I asked. The two things happened at almost the same time. What happened? It was hard for me not to connect them. If you want to teleport to another space, you must go through something like a wormhole, and whether it is opening a wormhole or maintaining a wormhole, it requires a lot of energy. Kaylan turned to look Valkyrie. Valentina, check the black box of the mecha. Did you see any abnormal energy fluctuations when you just exploded the sarcoma? Yes, records show that when I hit the target, the radiation intensity in the environment instantly increased to more than 1,400 times its original value, but the duration was very short. The entire process took less than a millisecond before the radiation intensity returned. It's normal. Valentina replied in a low voice. If this black box were not equipped with almost the highest grade sensing components available on the market, other mass-produced machines might not be able to capture even this momentary change. Less than a millisecond, no wonder we didn't feel it. Ivan, holding a chainsaw in one hand and a pair of long-handled pliers in the other, said thoughtfully. High-intensity radiation will have a significant impact on the human body, but if it is only for an extremely brief moment, so short that the radioactive source disappears before the radiation can penetrate human skin, then this impact can be completely ignored. At most, those who were exposed would only feel some itching on the surface of the skin, just like the breeze gently ruffling the hair. At that time, Ian's disappearance caused a severe shock to the hearts of everyone in the reconnaissance team, and almost no one noticed it. This is unusual. That tumor-like protrusion should be the vital part of this monster, just like the core of the erosion seed. Kaylan continued, there should be a large amount of energy stored in this sarcoma, and this energy, the moment the sarcoma was exploded, it was released and swallowed me into that abnormal space. To be honest, I don't quite understand. Hound shook his head in confusion, but I looked serious and stared at Kaylan with bright eyes. But that abnormal space is different from the space we usually live in. Kaylan stretched out his hands and gestured in front of him. Suppose this is just an ordinary teleportation, such as teleporting us from the surface of the mining area to Asia inside Gunak Toll. The energy loss that needs to be paid is starting from opening the wormhole and maintaining the wormhole until the end of the transmission. Although this energy can be regarded as an astronomical sum, it can only be regarded as a down payment, Kaylan said, but according to my speculation, the energy transmitted into the abnormal space is not enough. If you want to send the outside world to put things into it, you need to continuously pay more energy. It's like making a down payment and starting to pay off the mortgage, right? Hound said. Absolutely, but I feel that this loan is much more than the down payment. Kaylan took over and continued, if the energy of the monster larvae can be considered as the down payment, then the remaining mortgage part will require this. Come and pay it back. I seem to understand what you mean. Aya's eyes lit up. You mean, the monster summoned by Park Sang-woo died of being drained of energy by the abnormal space? And after it died, that monster, the abnormal space, lost its energy source and you were spit out? That's it, Kaylan said, otherwise, there is no way to explain why we couldn't find the same sarcoma in the big guy's body, because it had been drained. No wonder this guy has to carry the rescue capsule on his back like a snail. The sarcoma is its weakness. What it does is just to prevent us from discovering its weakness. Layton suddenly clapped his hands. But doing so is to hide the truth. Based on the location of the sarcoma on the larvae and the abnormal behavior of the mother carrying the rescue capsule, I deduced that the sarcoma was its weakness. But the Hound's face suddenly darkened. What's the use of this information? This monster has been killed by us. What is its weakness is meaningless. We still can't get out of this ghost place. Ah. No, its weakness is the key for us to get out of here. Ah, we finally found it, Kaylan said, suddenly reaching into the rescue cabin and digging out something from a pile of snot-like mucus. It was a thing that was completely black and covered with wrinkles, like a fruit core. The Hound stretched out his hand to pinch it, only to find that this hand-sized core actually weighed nearly half a kilogram. What the hell is this? So heavy. The density is estimated to be several times that of gold, the Hound exclaimed. This is what's in the sarcoma. Even though it has shrunk like this, the energy remaining inside should be enough to take us out of this tunnel. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi San. Chapter 503. Take it away. How to take it away and blow this thing up again. The corner of the Hound's mouth twitched twice. Are you sure that this will allow me to escape instead of entering the little black man you just imprisoned, in the house? Of course not, but use this thing as a medium to trigger the transmission mechanism in the tunnel, Kaylan said. Teleportation mechanism. Where is it? The second memory fragment that Kaylan saw in the abnormal space was Park Sang-woo standing inside the tunnel, stuffing the things in his hands into the crystal tanks on both sides of the tunnel that were used to power lighting equipment. Although Kaylan couldn't see clearly what Park Sang-woo was holding from his perspective, the voiceover of the memory fragment clearly told him that it was an ultra-pure crystal from inside Leviathan. Arazaka Yui once said that the energy contained in an ultra-pure crystal the size of a rice grain is equivalent to 1,400 standard unit 9-level energy crystals, and the one held by Park Sang-woo obviously has more than much bigger than a grain of rice. Those crystal card slots are not just for lighting. Lighten, is there any equipment that can be used to test the level of energy crystals? Kaylan asked. Yes, Layton rummaged in his backpack and took out something that looked like a vernier caliper. The crystal measuring ruler is not as accurate as the equipment used specifically to rate energy crystals in the trading house, but it is still accurate. It's pretty much the same. People who resell and buy crystals on the black market like to use this. In fact, Layton's explanation was a bit redundant. Kaylan and the others were all veterans who had been in society for many years. They knew all about the famous black markets and public toilets in Ark. Not to mention this kind of prop that is almost necessary for opening a store. The status of the crystal measuring ruler in this era is as important as the cash register computer and code scanner in the store in the old era. If we push it forward thousands of years, it is equivalent to the abacus and steelyard in ancient times. Although experienced people can roughly judge the level and remaining amount of energy crystals by just relying on their eyes and hands, special tools are still needed for accurate measurement. This is like those butchers in ancient times who have been selling meat for decades. They can tell how much a piece of meat weighs by just casually weighing it with their hands. However, in actual transactions, the cut meat still has to be weighed before it can be bought. Everybody is convinced. The operation of the crystal measuring ruler is very simple. You only need to place the energy crystal in the middle of the measuring claw, turn the nut to clamp it, and then turn on the power switch. The specific level of the energy crystal and the remaining energy balance inside will be displayed on the display of the ruler body. There are two types of crystal measuring rulers, Generally, the common ones in the black market are B-level measuring rulers. This kind of ruler can only detect energy crystals of level 5 or below. The minimum unit of balance measurement accuracy is 1 percentage point. The measuring ruler that Layton took out is an A-level measuring ruler that can only be seen in large merchants in the black market or official trading houses. It can measure energy crystals from 1 to 9 levels, and the balance calculation is even more accurate. 2 decimal places. Of course, better things are naturally more expensive. The price of a second-hand A-grade measuring ruler is enough to buy a whole box of brand new B-grade measuring rulers, and they are often sold at high prices but not in the market. The price-performance ratio between the two is simply incredible. It's a world of difference. The price of a brand new A-grade measuring ruler is almost as much as that of a desktop measuring equipment weighing several tons. Among them, the main reason is that the core component of the A-level measuring ruler adopts a part of the crystal circuit structure excavated from the alpha ruins, which is used to stabilize the beam of the output power of the energy crystal. This thing is based on human technology. It cannot be manufactured at all, not even imitated, and more than 95% of the cost of the entire ruler comes from this small crystal structure chip. This thing is not good. It will explode. Kaylan glanced at it and shook his head. This is an A-level measuring ruler. It's not the kind of cheap stuff you can see everywhere. It's impossible to make it explode even with level 9 crystals, Layton said. When Kaylan said no, he thought Kaylan took it out for him. This A-level measuring ruler was mistaken for a B-level measuring ruler, which can only measure up to 5-level crystals. Do you still remember the ultra-pure crystal that the miners of the Soma Consortium were looking for in Leviathan? The energy contained in that thing is thousands of times that of the 9th level energy crystal. Even the crystal structure of the A-level measuring ruler is it can burn it instantly. What? You said this thing is equivalent to thousands of 9th level crystals. Layton looked at the black core in Ian's hand in surprise, and his lips trembled involuntarily. The stability of this thing should not be problem, right? If it explodes, I'm afraid there won't even be any scum left in our group. I just exploded one of the Valkyries. It seems that the safety performance of this thing is acceptable. Kaylan threw the core in his hand twice, which made Layton's face tremble with fear. Okay, if this player is really that scary, maybe only this thing can test its energy intensity. Layton raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead, walked behind Valkyrie, and walked from a metal cylinder with a diameter of 30 centimeters and a length of nearly 1 meter was pulled out of the cargo hold. The surface of the metal cylinder was even covered with a silicone film to isolate the air. What is this? The Hound walked around the thing, and a strange expression appeared on his face. The shape, and the silicone sleeve on the outside, it is easy to think of that thing, but however, to be able to match a prosthetic body of this size, it would have to be a giant taller than a mecha, right? Old dog, why are you so full of yellow waste? Layton rolled his eyes at him and said, this is a special energy converter for the Phoenix series skeleton. It took the family group 6 years to develop it. A single cost price is 7 million credits. Good guy, if you take out the things, wouldn't the mecha be scrapped? Hound asked. This is a spare. Didn't you see that the sealing film hasn't been torn off yet? What's the maximum energy intensity that thing can withstand? Kaylan walked to the converter and asked. This, I don't know. The extreme test data is a trade secret of the YA group and will not be released to the outside world. Moreover, this kind of data has no practical significance. No one will spend a lot of money to buy one. The converter is for testing. After all, even if the converter is filled with 9th level crystals, it cannot be overloaded, but then again, who would use precious 9th level crystals for this kind of thing? What about the individual mecha? Let me tell you. Okay, stop talking. Can I just tear this membrane off directly? The Hound patted the converter that was standing on the ground by Layton, and pulled out a short knife from his waist. Whenever topics like equipment were brought up, Layton immediately started to talk a lot. If the Hound hadn't interrupted him in time, he would have been able to talk for half an hour. This is still a one-man show. If a colleague starts a discussion with him, this guy can even talk about a screw for a whole day. Yeah, but be careful not to scratch the surface of the heat dissipation metal tubes. In order to achieve the best heat dissipation effect, the walls of these metal tubes are made very thin. Layton held the converter and warned the Hound. So fragile? Can it also be used as a weapon? The Hound held a knife, selected a position, and cut the silicone film. This thing needs to be installed inside the mecha. It will definitely jump up and down and bump into each other during combat. It's inevitable. If it's really that fragile, what's the practical value of it? The base of this thing is magnetically levitated. If you have more money, you can even replace it with a small anti-gravity device. The converter will not come into contact with the inner wall of the engine when it is working, so there is no collision problem. Layton said then, while holding the pull ring at one end of the converter, rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, and carefully pull out the inner core. The inner core of this converter is made of graphite, gold, and a special superconducting material. After being powered on, the temperature of this thing will drop to more than -200 degrees Celsius. In that state, the resistance of the superconducting material becomes zero, and the electrical energy converted from the crystal can be delivered to the body with almost no loss. Unscrewing the cover of the inner core, there was a space with a diameter of 1 punch inside. Kaylan visually inspected it. If it were filled with level 9 energy crystals, it would be able to contain at least more than 100 pieces of level 9 energy crystals, more than 100 pieces of level 9 energy crystals. The converted energy is enough to allow a heavy cruiser to fly around the Alpha Star several times. If it were a lower energy consuming unit such as a single soldier mecha, it would continue to operate for 4 to 5 years without any problems. But compared with ultra pure crystal, it's still a bit far behind. For safety's sake, everyone should stand as far away as possible. Kaylan asked others to retreat far away, while he stood in front of the converter with the core in his hand. Layton sprayed a large amount of solidified foam on the rear of the converter, fixed the converter on the ground, and pulled out two wires from inside the Valkyrie and connected them to the electrodes of the thermostat. Layton did not directly connect the output end of the converter to Valkyrie, because no one knew how much energy was stored in the core. Once the output was overloaded and burned out the engine, the mecha would directly, if it is scrapped, the reconnaissance team will lose their most powerful combat unit. The converter has a spare, but the mecha engine doesn't. Layton connected the output terminal to the power armor of the dead security agency agent. Of course, in order to achieve the test effect, he removed the limiter of the armor's power furnace. That's it? I'll leave the startup time to Valentina. Kaylan, just put this thing in. Oh. Wait a minute, seeing that Kaylan planned to throw the core directly into the converter, Layton immediately shouted. Be careful. It's better to be careful, Layton quickly handed a gel to Kaylan. Kaylan squeezed out a little gel and put it on the fruit core, and stuck the core to the inner wall of the converter. Stay away, I can't guarantee what will happen. Layton stared at the converter with all his concentration, and slowly took 2 steps back. Yes, Kaylan nodded and retreated behind Valkyrie. Open your shield and prepare, Layton shouted in a deep voice. Valkyrie opened the energy shield at the same time as him, pushing forward. 3, 2, 1, power on. Valentina in the cockpit pressed the button. The thermostat made a soft buzzing sound, and then the entire converter began to tremble violently. Why is this thing shaking so hard? Layton, is this normal? The Hound in the distance asked nervously. Not normal. Not normal at all, Layton's voice trembled a little. Pull up the shield power to the maximum. The shell of the converter began to clang, and the outside of the armored power furnace gradually began to melt. Immediately afterwards, a large amount of black smoke came out from the cracked gap in the converter shell. The external temperature of the converter has exceeded 500 degrees, this thing is going to explode. As soon as Layton finished speaking, the converter that had reached its limit exploded. The broken metal pieces hit the top of the tunnel and bounced back to the ground. A large number of blue-white arcs raged outward from the center of the exploding converter, and most of the power armor placed on the ground, only half a meter away from the converter, was vaporized in an instant. Maximum power. You must resist it, Layton roared angrily. He and Valkyrie have 2 energy shields at the front, constantly absorbing the arcs coming in this direction. These arcs are actually just the aftermath of the converter's overload, but they are just the aftermath. Penetrated these 2 energy shields. Cut off the circuit, cut it off quickly, Layton shouted, my shield is about to be unable to withstand it. It has been cut off, Valentina replied, I cut it off when the converter started to smoke. Just when Layton's energy shield was so thin that it was almost invisible, the raging arc finally disappeared, and a large pit more than half a meter deep appeared where the converter was originally placed. As for the converter itself and the power armor, they were completely vaporized. The ultra-high temperature metal vapor slowly cooled down after contacting the tunnel wall, forming a colorful metal coating on the walls and ceiling. I almost lost it? Layton gasped. 7 million converters, not even a bit of dregs left, Hound swallowed with some difficulty. Could this thing be the same kind as the ultra-pure crystal found inside Leviathan thing? From a certain point of view, they are all energy carriers with huge reserves. Kaylan walked forward despite the high temperature that had not completely subsided. The black fruit core was now lying quietly. In the center of the pit bottom, it looked completely unchanged. This thing doesn't comply with the law of conservation of energy at all, Layton whispered. Why does a human-turned monster have this kind of thing in his body? If he could have so much energy, wouldn't he become a Superman? Already. It has nothing to do with Park Sang-woo. Kaylan bent down. The monster was not transformed by him, it was summoned. P.S. Thanks to book friend 2018082617331234 for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen Mi-san. Chapter 504. The objects that the Holy Word prays for may not necessarily be in the universe known to mankind. That gaze that still frightens Kalan to this day, since it can span countless planes and easily look at what humans think is eternal. Physical iron interferes, so it is not very difficult to teleport a monster with ultra-purity crystals in its body into this space. Existences of that level are just like the ancient gods who opened up chaos in ancient legends. There is no way to describe them in human language. Kalan once saw this description in a strange novel. They are indescribable existences. If humans hear their names, they will instantly fall into madness. They are existences that cannot be looked directly at. If a human looks directly at their true form, flames will burst out of their eyes and the entire body will be burned. They have been sleeping so that a race as small as dust can survive in the mud, and when they wake up, the entire world will be destroyed. Although common exaggeration techniques are used in novels, based on K. Ian's personal experience, this description is actually not an exaggeration at all. That kind of sacrificial ceremony is completely against the laws of physics. I also said with deep understanding. In order to study this topic, the Institute has invested a lot of manpower and material resources, and has established more than a dozen various special groups. There are more than 60 senior researchers participating in the project alone. Did you find anything out? Hound asked. No clue. Aya shook her head helplessly. There is no way to start the research project. It has been several months now, and there is no substantial progress at all. Is that an exaggeration? The Hound said in disbelief. If the Institute had not often entrusted our Security Bureau to collect relevant clues, I would not have known about the existence of this subject at all. If they could come up with any results, then our Security Bureau would definitely be the first to know the response plan. But now, for this kind of monster summoned by the sacrificial ritual, there is still only one sentence in the operation manual to deal with it. What? The Hound continued to ask. Concentrate firepower to suppress and kill. Kalan answered this question for Aya. He had seen the entire archives of the Security Bureau, and he had also paid attention to the content related to the sacrificial ceremony, but as Aya said, even if when someone from the Security Bureau encounters this situation, they don't have any effective means of dealing with it. Can't we interrupt him during the sacrifice? Asked the Hound. If we beat that man to death, will the monster not be able to be summoned? Okay, but the situation will only get worse, Kalan said. Some researchers once suggested that the sacrificer could be killed during the sacrificial ceremony, and perhaps the ceremony could be interrupted. The Security Bureau has also made attempts in this regard. They were in an exile camp controlled by a heretical section. They blocked a black-robed bishop inside. Under their deliberate guidance, the black-robed bishop broke out of the encirclement, and was then surrounded by a special agent team ambushing outside the camp, forcing him into a desperate situation. PS Special Agent Group refers to the Special Task Group. The original meaning of the word is taken here, not the extended meaning developed later. Black-robed bishops are a very special person in the heretical section. They wear black robes similar to those of ordinary believers. However, if you look closely, you can see the difference between the two. The bishop's black robe is long, it's big enough to mop the floor, and it's full of weird patterns. As for the black robes wrapped around the believers, it's just a piece of black cloth with a few stitches, and there are strict restrictions on the length. When standing straight in this case, it is not allowed to exceed the ankle position. In addition, the biggest difference between the black-robed bishops and the congregation is that they have the ability to use the Holy Word. In the official description of the Security Bureau, they have the ability to initiate a second-class sacrificial ceremony ability. As for the first-class sacrificial ritual refers to the ability of a container of erosion seeds to commit suicide. This ability is much more difficult to prevent than a container with erosion seeds parasitizing in the body. The latter only requires a simple inspection. It can be found, and the former's body is no different from that of normal humans. It is precisely because of this that Park Sang-woo was able to hide from numerous inspections. The black-robed bishops only need to recite the corresponding spell to start the sacrificial ceremony. The task of the special agent team is to find a way to force the black-robed bishop to initiate the sacrifice, and then interrupt it by killing him. Ceremony. The members of the special agent team first used an electric shock trap to trap the black-robed bishop, making him unable to move, and then used bullets to break his legs. The amount of bleeding from this kind of injury would only be possible if it was not treated in time. It takes more than 10 minutes to kill. This was also done to cut off the black-robed bishop's idea of surviving and force him to use his last trump card. Up to this point, the plot was still following the design script. The black-robed bishop had no hope of escape, recited the holy word and began the sacrificial ceremony. After confirming that the black-robed bishop was really performing a sacrifice ceremony and not talking about something else, the sniper of the special agent team simply blew off his head. Then, the light gunboat that had been waiting in the sky conducted a round of ground-washing bombing directly at the location of the electric shock trap. However, an accident happened at this time. A spherical storm suddenly appeared in the area centered on the black-robed bishop, and expanded rapidly, swallowing up the entire spy team that was caught off guard, and even the gunboat suspended in the air. None of them survived and were cut into pieces. The induction troops responsible for attacking the exile camp were able to survive because they were far away. According to eyewitnesses' descriptions, the interior of the storm was completely dark. It was not like a hurricane formed by high-speed rotating airflow, but more like a hurricane. Like a torn space. The gunboat also tried to escape from the storm at first, but as soon as the storm touched the stern of the ship, the 4 main thrusters exploded at the same time, and then the entire gunboat was dragged into the center of the storm. Although it is only a light gunboat, it is also a military-grade warship. The protection measures for the main thruster are not comparable to those of civilian ships. Even if it is directly hit by a 90 mm caliber cannon, there is no problem, but it was easily destroyed by the storm. The armor, which is hundreds of centimeters thick, and the main keel with a diameter of more than 3 meters, is like a paper membrane of equal proportions, folded and crushed by the irresistible force. Some people say that it is not a hurricane at all, but a space storm that was shocking in the drifting era. The term space storm first appeared in fictional novels from the old era. However, when humans truly stepped into the universe, they discovered that space storms in reality were far more terrifying than those in novels. But space storms are terrifying. This rare phenomenon only appears in space. In the 900 years of human drifting, space storms have never been observed on the planet. This is because as long as a space storm occurs on a planet, then the planet will inevitably be destroyed. A space storm can easily destroy an entire star system, and its destructive power is even no less than that of a supernova explosion. Emitted energy. The biggest difference between space storms and black holes lies in their intensity. Black holes just continuously suck in the surrounding matter and energy, while space storms constantly tear out countless fleeting space rifts. Every space rift is equivalent to an extremely unstable small black hole. On that report, there was a mark on the back of the space storm, which meant that the official did not recognize the statement. The range of the storm was less than 3 kilometers, and it had never been observed in human history. Such a small space storm, and even if it is only 3 kilometers in diameter, the characteristics of the space storm are enough to destroy Alpha Star. But the mark also means that the official has not completely rejected this possibility. Even the research institute cannot determine what the storm that only existed for a few seconds is. Later, similar interruption experiments were conducted several times. Each time the situation was different, but one thing was the same: interrupting the sacrificial ceremony would basically lead to catastrophic consequences. As for how lethal this catastrophic consequence was, strong, it is completely random and has no rules to follow. Once they tried to kill the sacrificer when the first word of the sacrificial prayer was uttered. As a result, the temperature within a radius of 1 kilometer dropped to -273 degrees Celsius, which is the concept of thermodynamics. The absolute zero lasted for a full 15 seconds, and no one who was affected survived. In another experiment, members of the Secret Service team killed the sacrificer after carrying out the ritual for 10 seconds. However, it only caused a small-scale explosion. Except for the sacrificer's body being reduced to ashes, the Secret Service team had no chance of killing him. One casualty. After paying a large price of human lives, agents of the Security Bureau rarely choose to interrupt the sacrificial ceremony unless there are special circumstances. They would rather fight the summoned monsters than face a completely unknown terrifying force. Interrupting the sacrificial ceremony is completely a life-threatening act. It may cause a group annihilation, or nothing may happen. The reason why Kaylan chose to shoot at the rescue cabin was actually a gamble. In his opinion, if Park Sang-woo's sacrifice was successful and something was summoned, the reconnaissance team trapped in this tunnel would be slaughtered to death, so instead of doing this, it would be better to take a gamble. Unfortunately, the bullet failed to penetrate the porthole of the rescue cabin, so he never had the chance to know the consequences of interrupting Park Sang-woo's sacrifice. But now it seems that this situation is not bad. At least the summoned monster is dead, and the cost paid by the reconnaissance team is far less than Kaylan expected. The most important thing is that this also allowed Kaylan to get the key item to escape from the tunnel, the black core used to store energy in the monster's body. Having said so much, how are we going to get out? The hound's eyes stayed on the black fruit core picked up by Kaylan. Even if the energy contained in this thing is enough to open an artificial wormhole, then we can't corresponding equipment. You said there is a teleportation mechanism here, but where is this mechanism? Why can't I find it? The architectural style of the tunnel is very simple. You can clearly see what is on the walls, floors, and ceilings. The joints between the metal plates are also tight. Just by looking with your eyes, you can't see where there are hidden mechanisms. Right in front of us, Kaylan walked to the crystal groove on one side. Isn't that thing used for lighting? Hound asked in astonishment. You mean, this thing can also be used for teleportation? He looked in disbelief. I saw some memory fragments of Park Sang-woo in that abnormal space. He once put an ultra-pure crystal into such a groove, Kaylan said. Because there were agents from the Security Bureau present, he attributed this ability to the abnormal space. However, the hound immediately heard the hidden meaning of K-Ian's words and nodded immediately. So this kid is like this. Escaped. Hound trusts K-Ian's abilities. At least so far, there has been no deviation in the unknown sources of information. But just when Kaylan was about to put the black core into the groove, Layton suddenly stood up. Kaylan. Wait a minute. What's wrong? Kaylan turned back to look at him. Valkyrie and I's energy shields are still cooling down. You should at least wait until we have finished cooling down before releasing them, Layton said. The explosion that occurred in the converter just now almost overturned the reconnaissance team. If it happened again, without the protection of the energy shield, even if they retreated hundreds of meters, they would still be affected by the arc. On the other side that had no energy shield defense just now, the arc spread at least 150 meters away. Okay, the shield generator has cooled down, and I have replaced the energy crystals with brand new ones. Layton raised his mechanical arm and nodded to Kaylan with a cautious look on his face. My shield has been charged, Valentina's voice sounded in the earphones. Okay, then I'll let it go. Kaylan took a deep breath, pushed the black core into the groove, and then quickly dodged behind Layton. There was no explosion or raging arc. From the third second after the black core was put into the groove, the lights in the tunnel began to flicker. As soon as Kaylan raised his head, he found that the surrounding scene was blurred, and then, the narrow space suddenly became spacious. They were really teleported. It's really useful. Let's escape. Before the word come could be said out of the mouth of the hound, the word stopped. They did leave the tunnel, but they did not return to the molten mine area. What is this place? I looked around, sizing up this space that was completely different from the tunnel. This is an extremely open space, at least several kilometers long and wide. There is a flat and smooth dome above the head, and less than 100 meters in front of it is a huge square pit. Layton quickly used a laser to measure the distance. This space is 8,400 meters long and 5,500 meters wide, and the height of the dome is 350 meters. As for the giant pit directly in front, it is a square with a side length of 1,600 meters. Look! It's a vehicle from the Institute, an agent shouted. On the edge of the huge pit, there was a shuttle-shaped metal vehicle with a damaged shell and holes, and a human corpse was lying on the edge of the vehicle. Less than 10 meters away. Ivan, I will leave the body to you, Zwilligito and Layton, please check this vehicle. Don't let go of all valuable things, whether it is data files or supplies. If the vehicle can, if it works, try to repair it. If you can't repair it, dismantle it, and take away all the parts that can still be used. Kaylan said. Old dog, team leader Brita, come with me to this pit to have a look. Ivan, Layton, and Zwilligito immediately ran towards the vehicle and corpse with their tools, while Kaylan and the other two carefully walked to the edge of the pit. This huge pit is not empty. In the pit, many huge cubic crystal pillars are inserted very neatly. The height of each pillar is flush with the edge of the giant pit, and the distance between each other is also exactly the same. What worries Kaylan the most is that the texture of these crystal pillars seems to be exactly the same as the energy crystals that can be seen everywhere in the ruins of Alpha civilization. PPS A large chapter of 4,500 words is considered a small extra update at the end of the month. An extra update of 500 words is also a bonus, don't you think? PS Thanks to Wang Xiaoquan for the 5,000 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 505. Exclamations came from Layton. After getting closer, they also saw these giant crystal pillars erected in the pit. These pillars, are they made of energy crystals? Layton had difficulty controlling his facial expression. Look at the color, they seem to be 9th level energy crystals. The volume and number of these crystal pillars, if converted into standard-sized crystal blocks, would be in the millions, right? Zwilligito said in a daze. More than that? Just one stone pillar is estimated to contain hundreds of millions of energy crystals. With so many crystal pillars gathered together, the energy contained in them is more than enough to blow up the planet, Layton said quickly. At the same time, the laser ranging equipment was started again. The cross-section of each crystal pillar is a square of 15 meters by 15 meters. The depth of the bottom of the pit is the same as the height of the dome, which is also 350 meters. If the base is not considered, if these crystal pillars are solid. There was a brief pause in his words. From Ian's perspective, he seemed to have taken several deep breaths before continuing. The energy crystal reserve in this pit alone is the largest amount that has been proven in all Alpha ruins so far, more than 2,000 times the total amount of crystals. Including Leviathan, the Hound couldn't help but ask. Including Leviathan. Then aren't we rich? After Hound said, even he was stunned for a moment, and then he spat hard. Damn, I almost forgot, we can't take anything out of this place at all. If the only way to enter and exit the ancient battleship is to rely on teleportation, then these crystal pillars may only sleep in this giant pit forever. If you want to teleport objects with such a large mass to other places, just turning on and maintaining the insect, the energy required for the whole is a number that is difficult to calculate. What's more, with human technological standards, it is impossible to create artificial wormholes. The arrangement of these crystal pillars here must be intentional, right? This space can't be some kind of storage room, right? Hound held his chin and pondered. It's the power room. The speaker was Layton. I think this big pit and these crystal pillars are the core energy supply array of Yagonactor, and this space we broke into, this is the power room of this ancient battleship. Power chamber? Then the energy required for this thing is too scary, right? The Hound licked his chapped lips with his tongue. Even if the density of nano-alloy is higher than that of many metals, the size of this thing is not the only one in the Ark. Is it 1/6 of that? I feel like Ark's main reactor is not that exaggerated. It can't be calculated like that. Layton shook his head. The Ark is essentially a colonial ship, and this thing is a battleship, this is a weapon. This energy supply array is not only its power room, but also its ammunition depot. Kaylan turned his head and glanced at Ayabria standing aside, whose eyes were full of solemnity. Kaylan immediately guessed what she was thinking. If this ancient battleship fell into the hands of the heretic sect, the end of the Ark would not be far away. Nothing on Alpha can compete with this battleship. Kaylan suddenly squatted down. He found that there were some inconspicuous wear marks on the edge of the giant pit. It seemed that someone had installed some heavy equipment on the edge of the giant pit. Are they the traces left by the construction of this power room? Or was it left behind by the Alpha civilization that later explored this ancient battleship? Kaylan stretched out his hand and gently touched the signs of wear and tear. Whether these marks were left by the civilization that built Agunakotar or by the latecomers like the Alphas, they have existed since the present. With a history of thousands or even tens of thousands of years, one can imagine how difficult it is to find any clues from these traces. Even if these traces are left by the Alpha civilization, for some reason, I can't activate the corresponding memory fragments inside Yagonactor, Kaylan thought, but there is a way that may be able to temporarily. We might as well give it a try to lift the third civilization's suppression of memory fragments. Kaylan did not hesitate. He sat cross-legged on the ground and locked the joints of the power armor to prevent himself from falling due to the sequelae of a headache or making some actions that might make Aya suspicious. Then, he started directly. Time to stop. The picture freezes, and the surrounding scene once again turns into black and white. Kaylan subconsciously glanced at Ayabrea out of the corner of his eye. At this time, the agent leader happened to be walking forward. Her figure was frozen in place, and her upper body leaned forward slightly. It's a pity that with the heavy armor, you can't see such a good figure at all, Kaylan complained silently in his heart. Team leader Bria, like Sophia, is a young white woman with a proud figure. Her figure is slender and tall, and her two long legs with golden proportions are even more eye-catching. In fact, they are not very thin, it's just that the fat grows where it should. If this kind of figure were placed in the old era, some people would definitely say that it is inseparable from their natural genes, but in this era, as long as you have money, no matter how ugly a woman is, you can transform her into a stunning beauty. Moreover, this kind of transformation interferes at the genetic level, and is not the kind of plastic surgery in the old era that only uses a knife on the skin. Therefore, if you marry an artificial beauty and go home, you don't have to worry about the offspring being born into crooked melons and cracked jujubes. Appearance. Unless the man's genes are too crotch-stretching, but a man who can afford to marry such a beautiful woman will not be stingy about investing in himself. I don't know why, but this time out, Kaylan suddenly missed the eldest lady of the Soma Consortium. Such a stunning beauty was offered to her for free. To say that Kaylan had no feelings for her would be a lie, but he couldn't accept a marriage relationship bound by interests in the upper class. He is a person with a slight mental misophobia. He doesn't like Sophia to be with him purely for profit. This makes him feel that he is more of a tool than a partner. Kaylan originally wanted to refuse righteously, but in the end he agreed half-heartedly. This was not because he was dazzled by the beauty, but simply because the other party gave too much. As a relic hunter, he needs money, and as a person carrying a heavy secret to survive in the cracks, he needs more money, and there are many things that are difficult to buy with money. Not only him, but the rest of the hunting group were also short of money. Hound needs a lot of money to support the families of his fallen men, Leighton needs a lot of money to pursue better equipment and machinery, Yvonne also needs money, he wants to open a larger clinic for Nada if possible, he would also like to take the exam to become a researcher. Talking about money is cliché and sentimental, but in human society, no one can survive alone without the economic system. Even in the wilderness, gray potatoes and slaves in exile camps are clearly priced. There was probably no love between the two at the beginning. The so-called engagement was essentially more like a cooperation and a transaction. Or to put it another way, an investment. But as their contact with each other gradually increases, the relationship between the two is also undergoing subtle changes. At least now Kaylan is not very opposed to this engagement. It's just that things like love and marriage are a bit too low priority in front of what he has to do. These messy thoughts flashed across Ian's mind, and his attention once again stayed on the traces on the ground. In the time-stop state, these traces emit a faint gray light, and there is a white outline around the outer edge, which looks extremely eye-catching. This can't help but remind Kaylan of the game Gwent 3, Gamble that was just released last month. Although this is a card game, it also comes with some RPG content. The glowing traces on the ground look like the scene after the protagonist in the game turns on Witcher vision. But in order for a Witcher to gain this ability, he needs to drink a special decoction in a ritual called the Trial of Green Grass. The process of this ritual is as cruel as the sacrifices of heretical sections. The survival rate of those who participate in the trial is only about 1/3, and among these 1/3, very few will eventually become demon hunters. But then again, the experience of this ability in the game is that it can highlight clues that are usually difficult to find with highlighted outlines. It is especially useful in some case-solving tasks. Players only need to follow the clues discovered by the Witcher's vision step by step, and you can easily find the culprit. Could this gray light be regarded as a disguised form of mission guidance? In the time-stop state, Kaylan could no longer feel the suppression of the memory fragments in the ship. Almost the moment he cast his sight on these traces, a large amount of information poured into his mind. Record of the first energy storage crystal imitation test. We have analyzed the specific composition of the crystal pillar. As an energy carrier, it is undoubtedly an excellent object, but it does not seem to be a pure crystal. We decided to start with the shell. Records of the 16th energy storage crystal imitation test. It still failed. Although the crystal was successfully condensed and formed, it exploded during the injection of energy. 17 people lost their lives because of this. Next time we make experimental models, maybe we should make smaller ones, but if they are too small, it will be inconvenient for subsequent operations. Records of the 19th energy storage crystal imitation test. We finally figured out the reason for the previous explosions. There was something wrong with the proportion of the crystallization formula. We overturned the proportioning formula obtained in the fourth experiment and started over from the first step. Record of the 75th energy storage crystal imitation test. Finally, 60 units were successfully injected into this trial product. There was no explosion or energy leakage, but the state of the crystal was very unstable. Violent shaking or bumping could lead to unpredictable consequences. This trial product was undoubtedly a failure and had no practical value, but it was also our first step on this path. Record of the 76th energy storage crystal imitation experiment. A true success. We have created energy storage crystals that can be used for practical purposes. We reduced the amount of energy injected and added more metal materials used as stabilizers and structural strengtheners inside the crystal. It is no longer a bomb, but a reliable and convenient energy storage device. But it still has very obvious shortcomings. The production cost is too high, but the energy it can store is not much. Record of the 113th energy storage crystal imitation experiment. We took over this task from the previous research team. Just yesterday, the last researcher in the first research team also passed away. This project has been spent 65 years, 1 year away from the above requirements. There are only the last 35 years left in the century-old time limit. First-class energy storage crystals have been put into mass production. They can be used in many small devices that do not consume a lot of energy. However, compared with these crystal pillars, they are still far behind. Under the same volume, the energy storage efficiency of samples cut from crystal pillars is 256 times that of first-level pure energy crystallization. This time, the pause only lasted for half a second and ended. In this half second, Kaylan read the energy storage crystal imitation experiment record written by several generations of alpha people until the end. Chapter 113. Energy storage crystals are what alpha civilization calls energy crystals, but this name is limited to the energy crystals created by alpha civilization itself. As for the irregular crystals in Leviathan's body and these giant crystal pillars in front of you, they have other names. It turns out that energy crystals were not invented by the alpha civilization itself, but were copied from these crystal pillars, Kaylan secretly said. Until the 113th test record, they could only create one super energy crystals. But before the alpha civilization disappeared, energy crystals had become popular in the civilization and became their main energy storage device. It seems that the imitation process of energy crystals is relatively smooth, as long as the alpha civilization has created 9th-level crystals that are equivalent to these crystal pillars. Unlike nanoalloy, it has never been possible to produce it by itself, and it can only rely on dismantling this ancient warship. In other words, this battleship may have crashed on this planet much earlier than I first thought. Kaylan raised his head and looked forward. There were still some cutting marks on a crystal pillar not far from the edge of the pit, but these marks were almost too faint to be seen clearly at this time. If Alpha civilization wants to conduct experiments, it will definitely need to collect a large number of samples. It is possible to dig out an entire crystal column, but the crystal column array in front of Kaylan and the others does not seem to have been too damaged. Judging from the faded traces on the pillars, could it be that these crystal pillars still have the ability to repair themselves? Kaylan thought about it. It seems that in the Alpha ruins, no one has ever found a defective energy crystal. Every newly unearthed energy crystal is intact, with at most the remaining amount of energy inside. It's just different. Those broken energy crystals were all smashed artificially after the energy was exhausted. It is basically certain that this thing has the ability to repair itself, but the repair speed is very slow. The traces on these crystal pillars are at least 10,000 years old and have not completely disappeared. P.S. Thanks to book friend 160904114808046 for the 5,000 starting coin. Thank you to book friend 201709180224063996 for the 500 starting coin. Thank you to book friend 160830085925711 for the 100 starting coin. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 507. Since the alphas once imitated energy crystals here, this power room must have a channel connected to the outside, otherwise, the personnel and materials participating in the imitation project cannot all enter and leave this place through transmission devices, right? The personnel and supplies were okay, but the large and heavy equipment, even if it could be dismantled, would be extremely troublesome to transport. Judging from the indentations on the ground, the tonnage of the machinery once installed on the edge of the giant pit was obviously not small. But what Kaylan couldn't understand was that since the Alphas captured this ancient battleship, why didn't they incorporate it into the fleet instead of sinking it deep into the magma lake? Apart from anything else, just looking at this power room, the combat power of this battleship can probably defeat all the combat units of Alpha civilization. Is there no reason to leave it in this place? Even if research is to be conducted, there will be no conflict at all. Transforming the battleship into a mobile fortress can greatly improve security and confidentiality. It is obviously a matter of killing two birds with one stone. But not only did the Alpha people not do that, they even started to dismantle the shell of Vagunakotaur to obtain nano-alloy. A series of idioms suddenly popped up in Ian's mind to describe this behavior. Buying coffins and returning pearls, abandoning the basics and chasing the scraps, squandering natural resources, boiling cranes and burning harps. Even he, a human on Earth, knew that this was a blood-losing deal. Could it be that this group of alphas, whose civilization level was much higher than that of humans, didn't know? This doesn't make sense. Could it be that, they couldn't control this battleship, so they had to sink it here? Lighten, Yvonne, have you discovered anything over there? Kaylan asked in the team communication channel. This guy committed suicide. Just like the man in the truck, the gun was not far away. Layton replied, the vehicle is useless. Someone shot the console with a gun, installed the hard drive and storage. The card areas are all empty, and the black box is gone. This must have been done by Park Sang-woo. Maybe the driver also killed himself and then pretended to commit suicide, Hound said confidently. But the energy converter and engine can still be used. Using these things, I can piece together a small propulsion device, which may come in handy. Layton continued, the supplies have not been touched, food, water and medicine. There is still a lot left, which is probably the only good news. At this moment, Asano Akira suddenly took a step forward, grabbed Ian's wrist and pulled him 2 steps back. Be careful. There is something crawling up from underneath. What? The Hound was so startled that he trembled and quickly pulled out the assault rifle hanging from his waist. There are a lot of them. They are climbing up the pit wall, Akira Asano shouted. With a squeak sound, the sword was unsheathed, and he stepped in front of Kaylan. At this time, even Kaylan heard the sound. It was the rustling sound of countless jointed limbs scratching on the rock wall, just like the sound of holding a handful of sand and the gravel rubbing against each other. As the voice gradually grew louder, a tingling feeling came to my mind involuntarily. It seems to be some kind of arthropod creature. It doesn't seem to be large in size or mass, but there are a lot of them, Kaylan said. He couldn't help but think of the Slijaw worms they encountered in the glacier ruins. At that time, facing the oncoming force, they could only escape from the fierce swarm of insects. But now everyone's equipment is no longer what it used to be. Layton and Valkyrie are equipped with heavy flamethrowers, which can instantly create a wall of fire nearly 100 meters wide and more than 10 meters high. This will be impossible for the swarm. The chasm beyond. Although force cannot solve most of the problems in the ruins, it can at least alleviate the fear in human beings' hearts. At least, in the face of the coming danger, everyone's first reaction is to raise weapons instead of looking for an escape route. Kaylan remembered a widely circulated meme on the internet, all fear comes from insufficient firepower. For example, many people are afraid of the dead, especially the resurrected dead people. The Resident Evil series of movies is undoubtedly a classic in science fiction thrillers. The scenes of zombies swarming over the mountains and plains are indeed full of oppression feeling, but the prerequisite for this sense of oppression is that the protagonist only has 2 small pistols in his hand, or only one M2 Laoganma and the bullets often jam. That's really scary. But what if the protagonist is sitting in the cockpit of the Gundam? That probably has nothing to do with terror. Although the adrenaline is also rushing, the reason is completely different. If the survival game becomes a lawn mowing game, then it will basically be just fun. Everyone is ready, Aya said to her subordinates. The remaining 3 agents looked like they were old teammates who had cooperated for many years. The division of labor was very clear. One person fired 3 flares in the air, clearing the huge crater. The edge was reflected like daylight. A person was holding a grenade launcher, and looking through the transparent window of the magazine, it was filled with napalm bombs with orange-red shells. They were also specially supplied by the Security Bureau and elite troops, and contained concentrated fuel. A combustion accelerant that can react on its own has also been added. allowing it to burn even in places without oxygen. As for the last person, he held a shield equipped with a shield generator at the front. The rustling sound became louder and louder, like countless hands scraping a blackboard with their nails. The hairs on the back of Ian's neck stood up one after another. He took a deep breath and moved slightly to the right. In one step, switch the firearm safety from semi-automatic mode to fully automatic mode. Lan was a little regretful. It would have been nice if he had installed an undermounted shotgun before setting off. That thing was much easier to use for killing insects than an ordinary fully automatic weapon. "It's coming," Hound reminded. The three of Leighton had already joined them. As for the supplies and vehicle parts that had not been transferred in time, they could not take care of that much for a while. Finally, the first bug appeared in everyone's sight. This is. The insect's body is like a louse that has been magnified tens of thousands of times. The head and torso are only the size of a fist, but behind it is a bloated abdomen as big as a winter melon. The back and lower abdomen are covered with hard. The protective carapace has a layer of uneven light green crystals attached to its surface. Lan only felt that this bug looked familiar, but he could not match the appearance of any beetle-like creature in his memory, whether it was an indigenous creature from Alpha Planet, or a cockroach that escaped from the Ark. The earthly creatures that have expanded their territory on this brand new planet. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 508. What kind of new breed is this? The Hound also complained. At this time, more than a dozen bugs had climbed out of the huge pit and crawled towards them with their jointed limbs. "It's not a new breed." Ivan shook his head, and then suddenly shouted, "Don't use incendiary bombs and flamethrowers." "What's wrong?" The agent holding the grenade launcher suddenly tensed up. His index finger had already tightened on the trigger. If he tightened it a little more, the napalm bomb in the barrel would fall into the gun. In the center of the swarm. These bugs are lava beetles. They are the larvae of lava beetles, and they have also mutated to a certain extent, Ivan said. "What? Lava beetles?" The Hound's face changed slightly. "Are you mistaken? Lava beetles are not social creatures." Hearing what Ivan said, everyone became nervous. If these bugs were really lava Cantharis, then what they were facing was not a group of ordinary bugs, but a bunch of bombs that could explode at any time. Ian's eyes couldn't help but jump. Although the lava beetle is rare, it is well known in the hunter circle. The main reason is its terrifying destructive power. An adult lava beetle can easily destroy a convoy without heavy weapons. For many hunters, if they find traces of lava beetles in the wild, the best option is to immediately turn the steering wheel and stay away from the area. However, lava beetles especially like to devour energy crystals and fuel. They can even chase the smell of gasoline for dozens of kilometers, and even ambush on some roads that are frequently passed by vehicles. If the Soma Consortium's fleet was not well equipped, if their firepower was comparable to the elite squad of the Field Corps, Lan and the others had already become a meal for the lava canthaphids on their way to Leviathan. The bugs in front of me are indeed somewhat similar in appearance to adult lava beetles. But the second half of the Hound's sentence was correct. Lava beetles are indeed not gregarious creatures. Not only are they not gregarious creatures, but when individuals meet, they often fight fiercely until one of them is killed by the other. Even if two lava beetles of the opposite sex mate, the male lava beetle will take advantage of the female lava beetle's weak period after she lays her eggs to kill and devour her. This is exactly the opposite of the mantises on Earth. In the final analysis, it is to compete for nutrients. Although a lava beetle can lay 100 to 200 eggs in a clutch, no more than 1/3 of these eggs can successfully hatch and be born. Adult lava beetles do not prepare food for their children. And those brothers and sisters who hatched later naturally became the first meal for the newly hatched larvae. They will preferentially bite open the intact eggs and eat the inactive ones inside. After all the eggs have hatched or been eaten, the remaining larvae will fight and devour each other, just like raising worms, in a nest of eggs. Only one larvae can often come out of the nest alive. That cave. But at this time, the larvae must quickly escape from the place of its birth, otherwise, after the protective pheromones it carries have faded away, the remaining parent will regard it as its own. Food. A newly hatched lava larvae is about the size of an apple. If it wants to grow into a behemoth dozens of meters tall, the nutrients it needs will be an astronomical figure. Moreover, there seems to be no limit to the growth of this creature. According to records, the largest lava mantis ever witnessed by humans is more than 300 meters long, and the high-temperature mucus it sprays can attack targets 2,000 meters away. One of the arthropods of this lava beetle is still on display in the central exhibition tower of the Ark Museum of Biology. Visitors have to take an elevator to the 26th floor of the exhibition tower so that the visitor's line of sight can be level with the top of this arthropod. Creatures such as lava beetles eat almost anything, and they especially like to devour their own kind. Although the self-destruction launched by their kind when they die is enough to make them paralyzed, the bodies of their kind containing a large amount of flammable material are, in their eyes, the most powerful thing in the world. The richest nutrient. It is difficult to find a second creature of this kind. Of father is kind and son is filial and brothers are harmonious in the same area, so why do they appear in groups? However, Ivan still insisted on his point of view. You can't be wrong. Although there is a certain degree of variation, in terms of biological classification, they are definitely close relatives of the same genus as the lava beetles in the wilderness. Mutations. Kaylan looked at the crystals covered on these bugs again. In terms of texture, these crystals are very similar to energy crystals, but the energy crystals have very flat sections, while the crystals on these bugs are very rough and have poor light transmittance. It's very low, like an unpolished jade blank. Kaylan thought of an arthropod living in the coastal areas of the Central Sea, the salt-armored crab. This swimming crab-like creature makes a living by filtering plankton in seawater, but in addition to intercepting plankton in seawater, their filter-feeding organs also absorb large amounts of salt into the body. When the salt content in the salt crab's body fluid exceeds a certain proportion, the salt will precipitate from the carapace surface, forming a thin layer of salt carapace. This is where the name of their salt-armored crab comes from. The salty carapace on the salt crab is caused by excessive salt intake, so the crystallized shell on these mutated lava beetles. Kaylan reacted immediately. What the hound said was right, and what Ivan said was also right. These bugs are lavacantheras. Lava beetles cannot live in groups because of a lack of nutrients, but in this place, their food is extremely abundant. It is so abundant that it can even form a crystalline shell on the surface of the body. These lava beetles living in the power room feed on crystal pillars. So there is no need for them to hunt their own kind. Attention everyone. Use conventional weapons to attack, and try not to aim at the abdomen of these bugs. It is prohibited to use energy weapons, incendiary bombs, and explosive weapons. Try to keep a safe distance of more than 30 meters from these bugs. If you are approached, if you get close to him, stop immediately, distance yourself and then kill him, Kaylan quickly ordered. Ivan and Zwilligita were the first to open fire, and the two Gauss assault rifles quickly formed a group of crossfire, covering the dozen mutant larvae rushing at the front. Just like the lava larvae, these mutant larvae were, after being killed, it explodes like a bomb, but it is a little different from ordinary lavacantheras. When ordinary lavacantheras explode, it will produce a lot of heat and fire, just like a gasoline barrel being detonated, but these mutant larvae explode. The effect produced is more like the effect after the crystallization converter is overloaded. Sure enough, the nature of the energy in the body will change with the change of the type of food. Kaylan couldn't help but sigh. This is a bit tricky. He and Ivan looked at each other, both of their eyes filled with worry. They are worried about the same problem. If a group of ordinary lava beetles are rushing over, Kaylan and Ivan will not prevent others from using area of effect weapons. It will be more efficient to detonate these bugs in a chain and clean them up. But these mutated larvae in front of them are different. They are equivalent to converters filled with energy crystals and always on the verge of overload. If one is exploded at the same time, the power of the explosion will increase exponentially. Resonance is originally a concept in physics, but when this word is used in the field of energy crystallization, it will have a whole new meaning. When a crystalline converter explodes due to overload, the explosion ranges of multiple converters overlap and amplify each other, thus greatly increasing the power of the explosion. This phenomenon is called crystalline resonance. Using the phenomenon of resonance, the Equipment Development Department of the Institute has also produced many crystal bombs. If one of these crystal bombs is detonated individually, the power is at most about the same as a grenade, but if 10 crystal bombs are bundled together and detonated, it is enough. Flatten a building. If the group of mutant larvae in front of me were destroyed at the same time. P.S. Thanks to Wang Buletin Chuan and Bai Biao Monster for never recharging the reward of 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 509. The explosion caused by that might not necessarily destroy the power room, but it would definitely be enough to kill everyone in the reconnaissance team. Fortunately, this area is relatively empty, leaving a lot of space for everyone to pull, and there is no need to rush to fight these bugs full of flammable and explosive items. They began to retreat, stretching the formation of the insect swarm as much as possible, and then used precise bursts to deal with the individuals on the edge of the insect swarm. This efficiency is too low. Hound couldn't help complaining, "It feels like I'm full of energy but can't use it at all." Although others did not complain like him, his words touched everyone's hearts. More and more bugs are crawling out of the giant pit, and the pressure on the reconnaissance team is also increasing. However, they do not dare to pour out all their firepower for fear of triggering a large-scale serial explosion. This feeling of being helpless is really it makes people feel frustrated. But Kaylan couldn't think of a better solution for a while, unless he could find a way to delay the self-destruction of the lava larvae. At this moment, Asano Akira suddenly took a step forward, walked to the front of the team, and said softly, "Let me do it." "Are you coming?" Kaylan was stunned for a moment, and there was a moment of hesitation in his heart. Although Asano Akira is the one with the highest personal combat power among them, it is taboo to deal with things like lava canthalates in close combat. Even if you can split these bugs, it is difficult to avoid the self-destruction launched by the bugs when they are about to die. It is enough to deal with one-on-one, let alone face hundreds of bugs. "Well, I'm sure." Akira Asano nodded. "Last time, after fighting Marshall, I can feel that my ability has become stronger, and I can deal with these bugs." "Has your ability advanced?" Kaylan thought for a long time before he found such a word that is common in fantasy training systems but rarely used in reality. But only this kind of vocabulary can be used to describe the kind of superpower unique to telekinetic experimental subjects. "Well, I feel like I'm almost breaking through that shackles. I'm just a little bit close to reaching the level that Marshall described to me." Ideology materialized. Kaylan looked at Asano Akira with some surprise. The handsome young swordsman closed his eyes and held the scabbard with one hand. His other hand did not touch the handle, but the scabbard, the sharp blade in his hand, seemed to come alive. It automatically popped out and fell into his hand. Asano Akira threw the sword to the ground, and the sharp tip of the sword suddenly sank a few inches into the ground, as if what they were stepping on was not a solid rock, but a piece of tofu that could be broken by a bullet. Kaylan couldn't help but frown. It was a good thing that Asano Akira became stronger, but Marshall had also told him that this kind of ability was not something that the human body could bear. The reason why the telekinesis experiment failed is because the body of the experimental subject cannot withstand the load caused by too strong mental power. Even an 8th level enhanced person like Marshall cannot bear the negative effects of this ability. Even if Asano Akira continues strong, it is impossible to be stronger than Marshall. Kaylan looked at him worriedly. From the outside, no changes can be seen at all, but Kaylan can feel that an independent space seems to have formed a few inches around Asano Akira. This is the absolute control field that has begun to take shape, and it is also a symbol of mental power approaching the limit of materialization. Be careful and don't force it, Kaylan warned. I know. After saying that, Asano Akira removed various parts of the power armor from his body. Wait a minute. Asano Akira, what are you doing? The Hound, who saw the scene, asked. Why did you take off your armor? Although the power armor equipped by the reconnaissance team is not as good as the two prototype armors provided by the YE Consortium, it is not a mass-produced model that can be purchased casually. Each piece is a custom-made armor based on the top individual power armor currently on the market and based on the design template of the reconnaissance team member's stature and abilities. Although he can't withstand the resonance caused by dozens of lava beetles exploding at the same time, he can still withstand one or two close-range explosions. But now that he takes off his armor, the self-destruction of a single lava beetle can kill him. His body exploded into pieces. Even for high-level enhanced people, the strength of their flesh and blood bodies is not as strong as this expensive alloy armor. The act of taking off the armor, in the eyes of the Hound, is completely seeking death. But Akira Asano just said calmly, the flexibility of the power armor is too poor and cannot keep up with my reaction. The Hound was stunned for 2 seconds, and then he managed to squeeze out a sentence through his teeth. I'm asking you to pretend now. If you are missing arms or legs later, don't worry, I will be the first to come over and laugh at you. What if Asano Akira isn't showing off? Asano Akira didn't take over what the Hound said, but instead, Layton said something for him. Then even if he is really awesome. Asano Akira took off his power armor, leaving only a breathing mask and a can of oxygen hanging behind him. He placed the scabbard on the ground, held the sword in both hands, and bowed slightly. Everyone, stop shooting in 5 seconds, Kaylan made a fist with his right hand and raised it high. Get ready to cover Asano Akira, he added. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 dash. The moment the gunfire stopped, Asano Akira rushed into the swarm of insects. Kaylan couldn't even see his movements clearly without starting and stopping, leaving only a series of blurs on his retinas. After image. The next second, a mutated larvae of a lava beetle was lifted into the air. After the mutant larvae had reached a height of nearly 50 meters, an imperceptible sword light suddenly flashed across its body. It was cut in half, and it could even be seen through the flat cut. Cross-section view of internal structure. These bugs, even the surfaces of the organs in the body, are covered with uneven, tiny crystals. The cut mutant larvae exploded violently after a short delay, but at this height, the aftermath of the explosion had already been weakened a lot by the time it reached the ground. For other larvae, this shock wave is at best a strong wind pressure. It cannot reach the threshold for them to self-destruct, and naturally it will not trigger a chain explosion. Good guy, is this okay? Layton couldn't help but open his mouth, and watched in astonishment as Asano Akira cut into the insect swarm alone, lifting all the mutant larvae that were close to him into the air. He even controlled the flying angle very accurately. Each mutant larvae that was carried away was kept far enough apart in the air to prevent interference with each other and cause resonance. As for how he delayed the split of the mutant larvae's body, Layton couldn't understand it at all. He only remembered that in many movies with cold weapon fighting scenes, in order to highlight the speed of the knife and the sharpness of the blade, after the blade passed over the body, it often took a few seconds for the knife to appear on the neck of the person. A thin red line, and then the body and head were separated. If you want to make it more exaggerated, in these few seconds, you can arrange a few lines for the dying man, or take a few more staggering steps, and then let the blood spurt onto the camera, and finally zoom out and take in the entire battle scene. In this way, the tension in the camera is almost instantaneous. P.S. With a little bit of personal information, I would like to recommend Kill Bill, one of Quentin's masterpieces of violent aesthetics. The scene where the protagonist kills Ishii Oren at the end of the first film uses a similar shooting technique. So strong, Jolajito whispered, and couldn't help but hold onto the battle axe hanging on his waist. It was his usual weapon. In the past, he was still very confident in his melee fighting ability, but after seeing the strength shown by Asano Akira at this moment, Jolajito began to doubt whether he could survive 3 moves under the hands of this man who was fairer than a girl. No. Let alone 3 moves, he might be dead in the first move. The dense swarm of insects couldn't get close to Asano Akira, not because Asano Akira dodges fast enough, but because all the mutated larvae that pounced on were lifted up by the tip of the knife, and no one was missed. With just one person's strength, he killed an enemy directly in the middle of the insect swarm, splitting the insect swarm into 2 parts. Layton and others who have been with Asano Akira day and night are so surprised, let alone Aya and his men. Their expressions now can be said to be as exciting as they are exciting. One of the agents, who carried a heavy sword and seemed to also prefer melee combat, almost knelt down to watch Asano Akira's performance. Isn't he the failed product of the experiment? Why? Aya said incoherently, are all the people who were eliminated so exaggerated? Don't ask me, I rarely see Akira Asano use his full strength. Kaylan glanced at her lightly. There should be archives of information about this group of people in the Security Bureau. You can check it out yourself. Although Kaylan is also surprised, he will not show this surprise on his face. His younger brother is awesome, so he, the boss, can naturally share this awesomeness. At this time it would be a shame to show the same amazing expression as others. To show off, of course you have to put on a complete set to get it right. Asano Akira, can you try to divide the insect swarm into several small pieces, so that we can easily eliminate individuals and speed up the eradication, Kaylan said in the team communication channel. Although Asano Akira took off his power armor, he still wore his headphones. He did not speak, but directly responded with practical actions. After piercing the insect swarm, he shot another carbine, separating several mutant larvae in the corner of the insect swarm from the large army. Concentrate firepower and prioritize the lone larvae, Kaylan immediately issued a new order. This battle only lasted less than half an hour. Because of Asano Akira, what was originally a hard battle turned into a boring target shooting game. Of course, the word boring is not used to describe him, but it is used to describe Kaylan and his group of audiences who spend most of their time watching the show. In the words of Hound, even if this clip is cut directly into the movie, there is no need for post-production staff to add special effects. The ghostly movement and miraculous swordsmanship are already fantasy enough in themselves. Looking at the corpses of mutant lava larvae lying on the ground, Kaylan began to count the number of lava larvae crawling up from the bottom of the giant pit. The total is 176. Akira Asano apparently started counting the moment he rushed into the swarm of insects. Kaylan gave the accurate number before Kaylan counted 1/3. 176, exactly the number of eggs a female lava beetle lays in a single time. Kaylan suddenly had a bad premonition. Although there is no shortage of food in this place, it will undoubtedly take a long time for the lava beetles to change their cannibalistic habits. The ancestors of these mutated lava beetles may have arrived here thousands of years ago. It thrives here until today. This means that, in this power room, at the bottom of this giant pit, there is probably a huge group of lavacanthus. The group of mutated larvae may only be a very small part of the entire group. This place seems more dangerous than the tunnel. On the other side, the hounds and Zwilligito picked up a large number of lavacantholite joints. They piled these joints on the ground and asked Layton to use a flamethrower to roast the surface of the joints until they were carbonized, and then used a dagger to pry open the joints. Scoop out the hot white meat inside and put it in a plastic bag. "What are you doing?" Ayabria asked curiously. "You didn't know that," the hound chuckled. although 99% of the indigenous creatures on Alpha are inedible, lava beetles belong to the remaining 1%. He continued, the abdominal sacs used by lava beetles to store fuel have extremely high radiation content and are highly toxic, but their joints are very clean. Although the meat inside the hard shell has a fishy taste and a rough texture. But it contains no radiation, is not toxic, and has a protein content that is at least 5 times that of synthetic beef. Don't the agents of your field team ever run out of ammunition and food when performing missions? No, Aya shook her head, we will bring enough supplies. Then what if something unexpected happens? Just like this time. Among the things listed in the wilderness survival tutorial that can be used as food, there is no such thing. Aya bit her lip lightly and said a little stubbornly. Oh, I've seen that thing. Every recruit in the field force has a copy. But no one takes it seriously. There are less than 20 kinds of food listed in total, most of which are very rare plants. If you strictly follow the instructions in the book to find food, many people will have already starved to death. If nothing else, the joints of this lava canopy are much stronger than the gray potatoes mentioned in the book, In terms of nutrition, whether its value or side effects, it's completely exploded. But the risk of killing lava beetles is far greater than collecting gray potatoes, I retorted. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 510. Who told you that the risk of hunting lava beetles must be greater than that of gathering gray potatoes? The hound chuckled. Little sister, let your uncle teach you some knowledge that is not in the textbooks. When Aya heard the hound calling herself little sister, Aya couldn't help but frown slightly, but she didn't say anything more, but looked at the other person with an inquiring look. Gray potatoes generally like to live in alkaline, dry soil, and there is another plant that also likes to live in this kind of environment, brown sunflower moss. Brown sunflower moss. Yes, so non-artificially cultivated gray potatoes in the wilderness are often accompanied by a certain amount of brown moss. Brown moss is just like its name, it is a gray-brown moss, and it is very fine and looks like it's like a layer of humus on the soil surface. Except for those old oils that have been wandering in the wilderness all year round, it's hard for ordinary people to distinguish it at a glance. The hound continued, the poison of this thing is not weak, it would be fine if you wore gloves when collecting gray potatoes. What if you don't wear gloves and you happen to have some minor wounds on your hands and accidentally come into contact with brown sunflower seeds, moss, if its toxins enter the blood? The hound paused for a moment, and then said in a deep voice, it can range from vomiting and diarrhea to collapse, or it can last for 48 hours, moreover, there is no specific medicine for this toxin, and all the prescribed antidotes and antivenoms are distributed. It's useless, this is a lesson learned at the expense of human life, but that ridiculous textbook was not included. Why? Logically speaking, such important information shouldn't be ignored, Aya asked doubtfully. She really didn't know anything about the things that Hound was talking about, although the field team of the Security Bureau often performed tasks outside the Ark. Most of the time they had special planes to pick them up, and in terms of logistics, airdrops of supplies were always on call. Compared with front-line combat troops in difficult conditions, their days in the wilderness are more like a young soldier's field outing. The description in quotation marks came from the mouths of soldiers in the front-line combat troops. As the leader of the field agent team, Aya had certainly heard the statement before, but she didn't care at that time. In her opinion, the tasks performed by Security Bureau agents are far more important than those of regular troops, and it is natural for them to receive a tilt in resources. But now she discovered that this title contained more contempt than what she originally thought was envy and jealousy. The news about the brown sunflower moss will certainly not be missed, but it will be included in another independent report. Oh, in the eyes of those experts and scholars, the lowly life of the soldier is certainly not worth their paper. The signature at the end is important, Hound sneered. Is there such a thing? I will definitely report it truthfully when I go back. Is it useful? The hound looked at her coldly and interrupted her. In fact, we have known about brown sunflower moss for a long time, and there is no use in revising the tutorial now. As for more similar bad things, you are alone. Can you handle this matter? Since you let me know, I can't ignore it, Aya said. A very righteous speech, Kaylan interjected and commented, in this regard, you are very similar to Ms. Victoria. Aya. Okay, let's not talk about it for now. Even if you want to enforce justice, you have to escape from this place first. Kaylan took out a piece of white meat from the hound's plastic bag and stuffed it into his mouth. The meat of the lava beetle is indeed not delicious. Even if it has been roasted, it still has a strong fishy smell. As Kaylan chews it, it continuously penetrates into his throat and then connects to it. The nasal cavity is coming out. Old dog, give me some water, Kaylan said with a bitter face. This was also the first time he had eaten the meat of a lava beetle. Before that, Kaylan, as an independent hunter, would hide as far away as possible when encountering this kind of creature in the wilderness. Only field troops with strong firepower would take out this kind of creature. Creatures are hunted for food. Water is useless. Try this. Hound smiled, poured some white powder from a small bottle, and handed it to Kaylan. What is this? Kaylan tried to dip a little with his finger and put it in his mouth. Freeze-dried chili essence. Hound squinted his eyes and waited for Ian's fingers to touch his tongue before he said calmly. Ian's word hum was still lingering in his throat without saying it. A burning pain quickly swept through the entire mouth, and the tip of his tongue was instantly numb and he lost consciousness. Ignoring the curse, Kaylan quickly threw off his backpack, took out his water bottle, and drank most of the bottle of water in one breath. However, the freeze-dried powder on his tongue dissolved into the water. After the brief cold touch, Ian's throat, esophagus, and even stomach began to burn. Ahem, this chili essence, ahem, is it concentrated? He squatted on the ground, choking and crying. Of course, the concentration ratio is about 1:36, anyway, it only takes a few milligrams to turn a large pot of clear soup into spicy soup. The amount you just dipped your fingers into is probably less than half a gram. Well, it can probably make hundreds of bottles of chili sauce, Hound said. It was okay that he didn't mention his fingers. When he raised his fingers, Kaylan suddenly felt a burning pain in his fingertips. He opened his eyes and glanced, only to see that the finger that had just been in contact with the pepper essence had become red and swollen. Look, you can't help but feel the fishy smell now, right? Hound patted Kaylan on the back and gave him his bottle of water. You still, ahem, have the nerve to say, ahem, I was almost scorched to death. Kaylan drank all the water in the pot in one breath, and then slammed the kettle at the hound. This is a good thing. Others want it, but I won't give it to you. As he said this, the hound suddenly turned to Aya and the others. He was carrying a bag filled with lava leg meat in one hand and a bag of chili powder in the other. Bottle smiled, would you like to try it too? The two agents subconsciously took a step back. Only the old agent who had served in the field force stepped forward, grabbed a handful and stuffed it into his mouth without changing his expression. Wouldn't you like some seasoning? The hound shook the bottle in his other hand. No, thank you, the fishy smell is nothing. The agent quickly swallowed the lava leg meat with water and declined the hound's kindness. How about it, do you want to try it? The hound looked at Aya again. Are you sure that the meat quality of the mutated lava candid will not change? Aya picked up a strip of meat about 15 centimeters long with her slender fingers and asked worriedly. It has been tested. It is non-toxic and parasite-free, and the radiation content is within the safe range, said the hound. Although the stomachs of those bugs are full of energy crystals, their legs are still clean. Those stained with I threw away the crystallized limbs. These are all carefully selected good products. Seeing Aya stuffing the leg meat into her mouth with a tense face, the hound turned to Kaylan and the others and said, Do you still remember the Zingai Lao where we had dinner last time? He also has lavacant hummus legs. Meat sales. There is a dish in my mind called Alpha Star Specialty Crab Meat Crystal Dumpling, which contains crab meat replaced by the leg meat of lava beetles. I heard that the raw materials can be sold for more than 4,000 credits per pound. Is this thing so expensive? I was just eating the leg of lamb that day and didn't notice these specialties at all, Zwilajito said in surprise. This thing is not that easy to do. If you want to hunt lavacant hares, the cost of labor and equipment is not a small sum. In addition, after the lavacant hare self-destructs, how many limbs are left depends entirely on luck. Unlucky if you do, you might only be able to get back half of the leg, and the price will go up as the tide goes up, Hound said with his lips pursed. But even if only half a leg is left, there is still several thousand kilograms of meat inside. A leg of an adult lavacanthus can be dozens of meters long. With any luck, the gross profit from one trip can easily exceed 8 digits. Jolajito counted on his fingers. A team that specializes in hunting lavacanthaphus must have a way to limit the self-destruction of lavacanthaphus. It can't be a guarantee. But there are so many fools that you can't resist. The price of this thing can be increased simply by taking advantage of the vanity and desire for novelty of the rich. To put it bluntly, it's like cutting leeks and IQ tax. Who the hell would a normal person spend so much on? Eat this kind of thing. Even if it has been processed by the restaurant and rinsed in red oil several times, the fishy smell is still there. Eating this kind of thing is simply looking for trouble. 40 yuan a pound of synthetic crab meat is, doesn't it smell good? The price is only 1% of this stuff, and it tastes pretty good. Well, sometimes I really don't understand what those upper-class people have in their heads, Hound complained. Hey, it's better not to accept the mission of exploring the ruins in the future. We will hunt the indigenous creatures. Anyway, there are no official regulations on what the hunting group wants to hunt. Then we will organize a few brands. What will they be like? Stunts like strictly selected by the hunting group and exquisite products may be more profitable than working hard like we are now, Layton joked. If I could really connect with the big guys who control the supply chain, I would have been in this business a long time ago, but now the market for this stuff is saturated, and sales are shrinking every year, although there is always a shortage of people in the world who are stupid. Guys with a lot of money, but their interests will also change. I heard that in the past 2 years, indigenous creature fighting performances have become popular again. It is very difficult to apply for a legal license for this thing, and it requires bringing live indigenous creatures to the Ark. That's much harder than a dead thing. Hearing what Hound said, Kaylan suddenly thought of Angelus Biotechnology Company, a subsidiary of the Morgan Consortium. The company's main business is to capture living samples of indigenous organisms and then sell them to various scientific research institutions on the Ark. However, according to the information Kaylan had, only about 1/3 of the indigenous creatures they captured were actually sold to scientific research institutions for experiments, and the remaining 2/3 were all transferred to legal or in an illegal coliseum. The Broken Tooth Black Market, which is only half an hour away from the hunting group's headquarters, has underground beast fighting performances every Friday. Kaylan and the others have also gone to see them once, but the performances held in this black market are very small and the indigenous people used the creatures are all small species with a body length of no more than 1 meter. Sometimes they are even just 2 bugs fighting in a bathtub-sized arena, which is really not interesting. After Kaylan and the others saw it once, they never went there again. As for that kind of large-scale animal fighting performance, it is not something ordinary people can see. Whether it is a legal or illegal coliseum, you must have a special invitation letter to enter, and the time of each performance is also confidential. If you are not in that circle, you will not be able to squeeze in. Connections. The Soma Consortium should have access to this field, Kaylan thought secretly, or go to that little fat guy Yayan, maybe you can get the admission qualification, but when it comes to large species. Kaylan cleared his throat. Although some of the burning sensation still remained, due to his super recovery ability, he was now able to speak normally. There is something that I haven't had time to say yet. After seeing everyone in the reconnaissance team focusing on him, Kaylan continued, since there are lava larvae here, and there are no larvae among the larvae, the phenomenon of killing each other occurs, then the adult lava cantholites that gave birth to these larvae may also be here. I think so too. The hound put away his playful smile and said seriously, so I just told them to stay away from the edge of the giant pit as much as possible, and don't get close if possible. There are so many crystal pillars in the giant pit, and each crystal pillar is equivalent to a pile of 9th level energy crystals of the same mass. It is really hard to imagine what kind of behemoths can be raised with so much feed. Ivan analyzed in a deep voice while chewing the leg meat of the lava beetle, but the good news is that even though we made such a big noise just now, no more lava beetles appeared, which means, either this giant pit is just a spawning ground for lava beetles, and they leave after laying a batch of eggs, allowing the larvae to grow here on their own. Or the movement is restricted and they cannot leave the bottom of the pit. I am more inclined to the first scenarios, Willagito said. If there is really a big guy at the bottom of the pit, then there is no way it will not react at all to such a big movement. Whether there is or not, you won't know until you take a look, Layton said, having already released a drone and flying directly over the giant crater. P.S. Thanks for the 200 starting coins from Hwame Lemon Candy. P.P.S. There will be an additional update tomorrow. The base price is about 8,000. I have saved a few drafts in the past few days. If the writing goes smoothly, there may be 10,000 updates. My health has not been very good recently, and I have been suffering from various minor problems. This is already my limit.